With extensive design and a subscale prototype already flying, this aerospace startup will change how the world thinks about moving people, cargo, and critical supplies around cities. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Builder Nation. For today's agenda, we have Brandon Robinson, CEO at Horizon Aircraft, the company building the next generation of eVTOL aircraft. So welcome, Brandon. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Well, thanks for the invite. It's my pleasure. So before I'd started a crazy aerospace company, I spent about 22 years in the Air Force. So trained in the Air Force as a mechanical engineer, but I spent most of my time flying F-18s. That was pretty exciting and managed to get a mechanical engineering degree along the way. Met a lot of really cool people, got an advanced business degree, and also had a chance to do the Canadian version of Top Gun, which is pretty interesting. And I think that operational background gives our company, if I'm going to fast forward a bit of an advantage in the current space. Near the end of my Air Force career, I had an opportunity to join my father to design a really cool new type of airplane. That prototype design actually morphed into the current design that you see behind me right now, which is our famous Cavorite X5 eVTOL. And so I took that opportunity. My father and myself co-founded Horizon Aircraft a few years back and built the company around this really cool concept that was now possible to do.
Wow, thank you so much. Great background. It's really interesting the fact that you worked and are working with your father. I think you must have had a lot of challenges at the beginning, probably. So, wow, that's quite a story.
No, it's excellent. To be honest, he is just an incredibly smart engineer and operational pilot too. So he's been flying and building and fixing and cursing at airplanes since he was about 14 years old. And so he has a ton of experience. So the best way to describe him is kind of like a MacGyver engineer. So you give him a piece of bubble gum and a toothpick or whatever, and he's going to build you something pretty cool. So that very practical aerospace design element kind of weaves throughout the company, and then also the operational aspects where we've been in those sticky situations, airborne and bad weather and unpredictable things happening. And so building an airplane fundamentally that's built for an operational environment that's pretty challenging, we're pretty proud of that.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you started a company back in 2013. So Correct. It's been 10 years now, right?
It has indeed, yeah. And so we actually founded the company, and not too many people know this, around a completely separate design. It was called the X3, and it was an amphibious aircraft. So it was a brand new amphibious aircraft. It was sponsored by some angel investors that were very interested in a functional, modern utility amphibious aircraft that could take off and land out of very, very short areas, but also do useful work and take fishing and hunting gear up north. And so it's interesting how things work. We were investigating shorter and shorter field capabilities, and the investor became very interested in this electric vertical takeoff and landing space. You'd heard all about these eVTOLs and seen some really interesting designs. And he said, hey, is this even possible? Can you turn this aircraft into an eVTOL? I said, well, hold on for a second. Let's do some market research. So the first thing we did, and I'm pretty proud of this, is started from the bottom up. So we took a lot of time to really do in-depth research about the regional air cargo and transport markets. And we want to make sure that there was a solid economic sort of foundation for building this machine. Our research indicated that absolutely it made a lot of sense to build this type of aircraft if it had the following specifications. So it had to go on the order of 300 to 500 nautical miles with full fuel reserves. It had to be fast to be able to turn it pretty quick. It had to carry at least 1,000 pounds of payload. And we had a number of different specifications. And so that provided a significant challenge for us in order to meet those specifications. But we spent a lot of time on the concept and eventually coalesced on the aircraft like you see right behind me right now. So that took a little bit of time, and that's why we've been at it for quite some time now. The company has a lot more experience and has a lot more depth than a lot of people realize.
This is indeed a great story. I did not expect this. Wow, I think this is great. Okay, so You started a company, only you, your father, and how many people started at the beginning? Only you two, or it was a team of 5 or something like that?
Yeah, there was about a team of 5 or 6 key folks. We got really lucky. So my father, over the years of working in the aerospace sector, he had collected some very talented folks in his orbit. One of those individuals, for example, had designed and built and flown 2 of his own clean sheet aircraft designs, which, you know, you don't meet a lot of folks that have survived that endeavor. Everything from electronics to advanced computational fluid dynamics. And so we just had a very special kind of group of folks that punched way above our weight initially. So we came up with a pretty solid concept. And then we built out the team. We're just shy of 20 folks now, working almost full time on this concept. So the team is growing pretty well.
It is indeed. I mean, And you just released the Cavorite X5, which is behind you. So what will you say makes this special?
Okay, so like any electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, this one is capable of taking off and landing just like a helicopter. So it can take off and land just like a helicopter out of any sort of concrete pad, 40 by 40 or any helipad. However, this one, when it transitions forward, you can see the array of lift fans in the wings and in the canards that are behind me that are open right now. Those wings and canards actually close up to completely hide that vertical fan array and return the aircraft to a very low drag configuration en route. So for 98% of the time, this airplane is flying around just like a normal aircraft. So on wing-borne lift, there's not a huge amount of drag. There's not 8 propellers out in the airstream creating drag. So it's very fast and very efficient. That's kind of our configurations. A traditional helicopter, for example, its entire design space is almost around just the takeoff and landing portion. Now, if you're not using the helicopter for long duration hover, so if you're using helicopter to go mainly from point A to point B in confined areas, you're paying for that entire trip is less efficient because the whole helicopter is designed around takeoff and landing. So we turned that upside down. Our entire aircraft is designed around the 98% of the mission that is spent in cruise, going from point A to point B. And we take an engineering hit. It demands a lot of power on takeoff and landing, and that's the concession that we made for this concept.
Really impressive. That's all I have to say. And I was looking through the website and I was reading an article. And is it true that this prototype has almost 800 custom printed parts?
Oh, absolutely. So our 50% scale prototype, who has just gone into the wind tunnel doing transition testing. It's been through a very extensive hover testing program. And 50% is large. It's a 22-foot wingspan, weighs almost 500 pounds. Think of it as a small general aviation aircraft. It has almost 800 custom 3D printed parts, all carbon fiber reinforced thermoplastic type stuff. But that 3D printing has really allowed us to rapidly prototype and produce a pretty cool machine in very short time frames.
Is there a specific reason why you decided to merge into this industry?
To be honest, we had that opportunity with the investor that was very interested in a new prototype, and it sort of evolved very naturally for us. But we're pretty excited about the industry, to be honest. And so I'd say as short as 5 to 7 years ago, you couldn't really build a machine like this anymore. But now electric motors, electric speed controllers, battery technology has just crossed the threshold where if it's properly organized, you can build a really effective electric vertical takeoff and landing machine. Now, ours is a little different than most. It's the only one that flies exactly like this. We have patented a wing system, but also it's hybrid electric. So it's not pure electric machine. It still leverages some internal combustion engine to get some high efficiency and high power for that speed and range.
Okay, so you've been around for 10 years now. You must have had a lot of challenges, just like you mentioned at the beginning. I wanted to ask you, what happened with the pandemic, especially being a hardware company? Did you struggle with supply chain, procurement, anything like that?
That was challenging for us, to be quite frank. It also created unique opportunities. So we were small enough and flexible enough that we really leveraged the telework. So a lot of the design phase for our half-scale prototype occurred during the pandemic and the shift over to building that 50% scale aircraft. And so naturally, as long as you are meeting frequently online and doing a lot of the design phase, that work can be done in a distributed fashion. We still like to get folks together every once in a while, once or twice a week during the pandemic, and that was challenging. So just from a workforce perspective, it was challenging to organize all that and keep communication flowing and keeping the design rolling forward. And then, of course, trying to get parts shipped on time. We ended up doing a lot of it in-house. And so we design and print our own circuit boards. We do our own carbon fiber construction in-house. We do all our 3D printing in-house. Made that decision early to bring as much in-house again during the pandemic, and it really paid off in terms of our ability to control and iterate very quickly, and also to avoid some of those bigger problems. But yeah, we still had the odd hiccup. We're trying to get some of the smaller parts, and anyway, there was the typical challenges.
Okay, so one of the last questions, what will you say it's the future of the industry, or how does it look like?
The first thing I'd say is that it's an exciting time. We see a lot of negative news around these days, and there's a negative bias in all sort of media, but we're living in a really cool time. We have rockets landing back on Earth, and now we have these planes that can take off and land vertically, but go twice as fast as a helicopter. It's a pretty exciting time. In the future, heaven forbid, one of your family members is injured on the side of the road, and one of these aircraft comes in and picks you up from a medevac situation and gets you to the hospital twice as fast as it would normally. So the first thing I would say is it's a pretty exciting time. As an entrepreneur, don't let the world and the media kind of get you down. There are so many interesting things happening across a broad spectrum of industries. So anything from AI to aerospace to nuclear fusion is coming up. There's a bunch of really interesting things happening. So that's the number one thing I'd say, stay positive. There's a lot of people that'll tell you all the reasons why what you're doing is not going to work. The second thing I would say is we've moved away from building. Human beings used to build a lot of cool stuff. We used to build rockets and go to the moon. We're doing that again now. It seems like for a long time, we were just building software and trying to figure out better ways to build advertisements on the internet to collect information. I'm not disparaging the software industry, but now I think we're moving back to the point where the human race is now building again, which is pretty fantastic. So as alluring as it is to do something very simple and try to just iterate on something, actually building a useful piece of engineering work is becoming quite valuable again. And then that takes a special group of folks and a special team. And I think the third thing would be, well, and this is maybe where we get wrong a little bit, we don't market as much and as flamboyantly as some other folks. What's worked for us is fundamental engineering design, build a really solid product just like we used to a long time ago, and not oversell it. Make sure that everything is foundationally correct from an economics perspective and an engineering perspective. Focus on the product, focus on the team, and it's going to happen. Now, I guess the last thing I would say is don't give up. I think the single thing that's defining of a good entrepreneur, and I'm not calling myself one yet, but is not giving up. And so that quality of grit is quite important. Again, it's very easy, especially with modern media and social media, to have a lot of negative energy directed at you. And they're going to tell you on a daily basis why your airplane or your machine is not going to work. Again, they don't know what they don't know most of the time. And I politely thank them for their critical feedback and very happy to explain as much as I can. But that will get you down if you're not a naturally sort of optimistic person and you really defend against it. So keep rolling forward. Don't listen to the critics. But of course, a bit of critical feedback is okay now and again. But yeah, stay optimistic and keep going.
That was a great piece of advice. Those three advices were amazing. So thank you so much for sharing. The last question, what will you say are the next steps for Horizon Aircraft?
So it's pretty exciting. We're moving on to the full-scale aircraft design. So we are simultaneously testing transition flying on our half-scale aircraft. I think we're ahead of a lot of folks when it comes to that. Of course, some really big companies are making some great strides. That's going to be a really exciting time. And then also learning from that experience and iterating and improving the full-scale aircraft design and starting to build some full-scale aircraft propulsion units and maybe a wing pretty soon to start doing some really cool real-world testing. So that transition to the full-scale aircraft, which should be done in the next 24 to 30 months to have a full-scale technical demonstrator. We're pretty excited about that.
Well, excited for that as well. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be great. I mean, it's really close. I thought you were going to say like, it's going to be in 5 years or in 10 years.
It's not a fully conforming certified production line aircraft. It's a technical demonstrator, but it'll have everything set up, all the technology, the way it'll eventually look on the conforming aircraft. So
amazing.
Pretty excited about that.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you or the company?
Oh, sure. So horizonaircraft.com. You can find us on LinkedIn primarily for all the different info. We also have a YouTube channel that we upload some of our latest videos to. So go and check some of the latest wind tunnel video out. It's pretty cool. That's about it.
Amazing. Thank you. And remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one with Brandon, directly on our website, controlhub.com/wheeler-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time and for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.